The Lakers have won 18 of their last 22 games and are now the second seed out west. About half of that stretch happened after making the blockbuster trade for Luka Doncic, including a current 7-game streak that featured the Nuggets, Mavs, Timberwolves, and 2 games of the Clippers. With a team that's built around 2 offensive juggernauts in Luka and LeBron, and a third offensively oriented player in Austin Reeves, you'd think that these wins are a result of outgunning teams with their scoring, but it's actually been quite the opposite. On January 23rd, they went up against Boston, and in that game, their attention to detail on the defensive end was unlike anything we'd seen from this group before. That continued against the Warriors, and then the Hornets. Then against the Sixers, Anthony Davis went down with an injury, and many people, myself included, wondered how they'd be able to make up that ground without one of the best defenders in the league. Then on February 1st against the Knicks, they had one of their best defensive performances of the season, showcasing a new strategy that was built on utilizing their versatility and speed, as opposed to relying on a rim protector like Davis to clean up all of their mistakes. That game in New York is when they proved that they could defend at a high level without AD, and in every game since then, they've continued to prove that point. As I mentioned, that game against Boston was the shift, and they've played in 18 games dating back to that point. In those 18 games, they've held opponents to less than 109 points every 100 possessions, which is actually number 1 in the NBA. Don't get me wrong, it's not like they completely lack good defensive personnel. Jared Vanderbilt and Dorian Finney-Smith both look awesome and are 2 of the better wing stoppers in the league, as is 40-year-old LeBron James, who decided to turn back the clock and put together his best stretch of defense in half a decade, which should not go unnoticed whatsoever. But with those wings, they do also have some weak links. Luka really lacks foot speed, so he's a guy who struggles to stay in front of the ball in space. Reeves also tends to struggle containing ball handlers at the point of attack at times, and although he works hard and plays physical, he is a mismatch down low for bigger wings and forwards. The same applies to Dalton Knecht when he's in the game, and the Lakers have been putting out a decent amount of lineups with at least 2 of these guys on the floor together. Traditionally speaking, defenses would cover for these types of guys by playing cleanup at the rim. My mind immediately goes to the 2021 Jazz. They had very little perimeter resistance, so they implemented a system that ran shooters off the line and funneled the ball into Gobert under the basket. The Lakers don't have the luxury of a Rudy Gobert type of player though. Jackson Hayes has been awesome, but he's pretty much the only big who's consistently in their rotation, and he isn't that type of interior presence. So they've instead opted for more of an Eric Spoelstra Miami Heat style of defense, with the entire team working together positionally to protect the paint. Priority number 1 for this Lakers defense is to not let the ball touch the middle of the floor. So, much like the Heat, they've shown a willingness to consistently fall back into a 3-2 zone. When Harden sets up atop of the key isolation, not only does he have to worry about help sitting in the gaps near both wings, LeBron is waiting at the free throw line for a drive, so pretty much all he has access to is a tough off the dribble jumper. This time it's Kawhi who's looking to play one-on-one, and Luka's sitting on a right-hand drive, while Vando aggressively plays the nail against a left-hand drive. He doesn't overcommit though, so he's able to get back to Harden without giving up an advantage. Then they get it back to Kawhi for another isolation, and when he instead tries to attack baseline, he runs right into Luka with nowhere to go. Even when they aren't in that 3-2 zone though, their set man-to-man defense functions in the same way. They like to do a lot of peel switching, meaning that on a play like this where Chris Dunn moves it to Bogdanovic for a quick drive, Luka's gonna stay in the middle of the floor to pick up the ball and take away any angle to the rim. Something else they like to do is abandon non-shooting threats. We've seen a lot of teams in the past let weaker shooters take the open 3, but I'm not sure we've ever seen a team this aggressive with it. anytime the opposing team has a weak shooter on the floor, whoever's supposed to be guarding him is only worried about defending the middle, which completely clogs up driving lanes and forces ball handlers to live off of jumpers. Here's a good example. When Harden looks to isolate, notice how Luka angles his body to push him to the right, where Gabe Vincent's parked on the elbow to double. Then when it gets moved to Dunn, they make no effort whatsoever to close that space. This was basically the story of both games against the Clippers. Wherever Dunn went on the floor, nobody followed him, and as a result, they weren't just able to sit in the gaps and protect the middle, they were able to send all sorts of doubles and traps. The Clippers tried to adjust by having Dunn play on the ball, but the Lakers acted as if he'd never shot a basketball before, not just ignoring him, but blatantly leaving him on an island to prevent guys like Kawhi or Harden from getting anything clean. It wasn't just the Clippers who struggled with this though. They did the same thing against the Mavs with Kessler Edwards, abandoning him on the wing to take away potential driving lanes. When it wasn't Edwards, it was Najee Marshall. Notice how Luka's instincts tell him to close out, but he deliberately stops his momentum because they want Marshall taking that corner three. And they also did it in that game with Dante Exum, who ended up shooting 2 of 7 from 3 in just 11 minutes of play. Against the Nuggets, it was either one of Russell Westbrook or Aaron Gordon who they let empty the clip in hopes of slowing down Jokic. So offenses can't really create any downhill pressure as long as they're playing from up top. But even when they play from deep on the wing or in an empty corner, the Lakers have implemented some tactics to shut off the paint. Like I said earlier, whoever's defending the ball is going to angle their body to force the attack baseline. Well, when there's nobody in the corner, that means help has to come from the other side of the floor. So a staple of this Lakers defense is to send the low man over from the weak side early to load up on a baseline drive, which takes away both potential angles. This allows them to get away with switching anyone onto the ball. You don't have to worry about Luka's lack of foot speed if you're taking away the middle and funneling the ball into immediate help. Some teams will try to attack this setup by putting a lob threat on the opposite block, and that's why it's imperative that in addition to the first weak side defender cheating over, the low man drops to protect the rim and blow up that pass. For that reason, this strategy completely falls apart if just one piece to the puzzle is missing. On this one, Luka angles his body to force an attack towards the corner, but the weak side help is late getting over and they give up a layup. And this time the weak side help gets over in time to load up early and shut off the drive, but the third defender doesn't come over to take away the paint, which again leads to a layup. However, the buy-in and attention to detail has been incredible across the board, so these breakdowns have been few and far between. As a result of not having the most imposing interior presence, you'll have to live with a big like Zubac occasionally getting the dump off and scoring down low, but when the scheme works as intended, you can ideally take away the drive and the dunker, meaning that the only available option is a skip pass, then you can rely on that speed to scramble and recover to the perimeter. Remember though, they aren't worried about anyone who isn't a premier shooting threat. So on a play like this where Luka and Reeves essentially trap Harden and Derrick Jones Jr. is left on an island in the opposite corner, they're willing to give up the skip pass without closing out, as they're only worried about not giving up a drive. This idea of pushing the ball away from the middle and towards the baseline isn't exclusive to isolations. More times than not, when the offense tries to set up a pick and roll on the wing or with an empty corner, they're looking to ice the action. If you're unfamiliar with the term, that means the point of attack defender is going to position their body to force the action towards the sideline, where the big is sitting in the only driving lane, typically in some sort of drop coverage. And again, this is just another way for them to take away the middle. By forcing the ball baseline and having a big wait to pick up the handler, it's really tough to put pressure on the rim. NBA offenses use all sorts of different screening actions to create advantages though, and the Lakers have a pretty specific coverage for each scenario. If an offense goes to one of their weaker shooters as the ball handler, they're gonna go under every screen in hopes that they can bait them into taking an off the dribble jumper. If an offense uses a wing as a screener instead of the big, they're going to switch every time so that they can always keep a body in front of the ball. And if that screening wing also happens to be a non-shooting threat, not only are they going to switch, that second defender is going to abandon the weaker shooter to take away the middle. As for off-ball screens, most commonly set for movement shooters, they're also going to switch all of those to not let them get free on the three-point line, forcing them to create off the catch. Just look at this play against Steph. When he sets a screen for Hield, Vincent's gonna switch onto him. Then when he turns and runs off a screen from Draymond, Rui switches onto him, and he ends up with a semi-contested look from outside. Something you'll notice is that they basically never put two on the ball in screening situations. That really stands out when they're defending spread pick and roll, because the big is almost always gonna sit back in a drop while everyone else plays the gaps. But it's not a traditional drop coverage because Hayes is constantly making a read. If the point of attack defender is able to get around the screen without getting stuck, Hayes will stay back in that drop and let him recover. But if that defender gets hit hard by the screen or gets taken out of the play, then Hayes is going to commit to the ball and they're going to switch. This works because Hayes is really good at defending in space. He moves his feet super well, he's got good hip mobility, and he has the length to contest jumpers. I can't quite say the same for Trey Jemison though. With Rui out for both Clippers games, Jemison had to step in, and he wasn't nearly as effective on those switches. But this doesn't concern me at all because when Rui's in the lineup and they've got all of their guys, those non-Hayes minutes are typically going to be small ball where they'll really lean into that versatility by switching every action. We saw all of these concepts work together beautifully against the Nuggets. One of the biggest concerns with this Lakers defense was size and how they'd handle a guy like Jokic, and they played one of the best individual defensive games on him that we've ever seen. They went small, they switched every action, then they'd front him in the post while having the weak side defender cheat over to deny him the touch. And anytime he was able to get the ball in the post, they'd immediately come with one of those aggressive doubles from the weak side while the low man slid down to take away the dunker. As a result, they were able to hold Jokic to just 7 shot attempts and 6 turnovers in a 23-point win, where they held Denver's scorching hot offense to just 100 points. So they've built a defensive scheme that completely shuts off both drives and post-ups and forces weak shooters to beat them from outside. As a result, teams just simply haven't been able to score unassisted twos against them. Again, using those last 18 games, they've allowed just 19.5 points to unassisted twos every 100 possessions, while no other team in the NBA is even below 22. Typically, when you're selling out on unassisted twos, that means you're abandoning the three-point line, but remember, they aren't letting good shooters get free, so they don't actually end up losing a ton of points. Teams have shot just 32% from 3 against them in this stretch, and I'm sure some of that is due to shooting luck in a smaller sample, but they're consistently giving up tons of threes to guys who simply aren't reliable shooters. I mentioned how Exum took 7 threes against them in just 11 minutes. In that same game, Najee Marshall also attempted 5. In the most recent game against the Clippers, Chris Dunn attempted 5, including 3 misses nearing the end of the fourth. In the Nuggets game, Gordon and Westbrook combined for 14 three-point attempts, and if you go game by game over the stretch, this is a pretty clear trend. For that reason, I still do need to see how this strategy works against teams who don't play non-shooting wings before I make the claim that they'll be able to sustain this in the playoffs. Some names that come to mind are obviously the Celtics and Cavs in the East, but out west the Grizzlies, and more importantly the Thunder when they go to their 5-out looks. They play the Knicks on Thursday and the Celtics on Saturday, so that'll be 2 good tests coming up, but as of right now, there's no reason to believe they aren't an elite defense. The scheme has been beautiful, the buy-in has been amazing, and if they find a way to maximize the offense before April, there isn't a team in existence that would want to see them in a 7-game series. If you enjoyed this breakdown, make sure to drop a like, subscribe, and turn my post notifications on to be first on more content. If you're interested in my more in-depth research, make sure to check out the Hoop Venue podcast and my social media profiles. You can find those links in the description. Feel free to let me know down in the comments what you think of the Lakers. As always, I hope you all have a great day, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.